Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on Pathfinder, the role-playing game system. Well, when we last left off, I was talking about magic items, and I had talked about scrolls. Let's finish our little discussion on scrolls and talk about staves today. Alright, so you have your magic scroll, you've been activating it. Once you activate a magic scroll, it functions just like the spell that is on the scroll. It activates in much the same way that you would have prepared this spell yourself. So if you've met all the requirements, you've successfully made any kind of checks you might need, you're casting it, it functions just as if it had been on your spell list and you were casting it all on your own. There is some things about it that you have to know about. First off, the caster level is going to be the minimum caster level needed to cast the spell on this scroll, unless the creator, the forger of this scroll, particularly made it at a higher cast level. They chose to use a higher cast level if they had one in the creation of this scroll. So, for example, Magic Missile. First level spell, you need to be first level caster. If you have a scroll of Magic Missile, it's assumed to be caster level 1, unless particularly when I made it, I chose to have it at a higher caster level, and then that scroll is at that higher caster level. And again, like I said before, once you cast that spell, the writing on the scroll disappears. So if you do have multiple spells in the same scroll, that means little bits of that writing disappear as you use it. Now, a mishap. We talked about a mishap before, but a mishap is basically when something bad goes on. When the ability is reversed or the spell is turned back on the user, basically it's reversing the effects in a certain way. Your game master is going to choose the actual effect of this, though the book provides 7 examples of possible mishaps that can occur. The example that I will give you for today out of all of these is when you cast the spell, it targets a random space somewhere within the range of the spell, rather than targeting wherever you were going to target. So if I was, let's say, mishapped a fireball scroll, I was going to aim over there, guess what? It could turn back on my friends, it could turn over there, you never know where it's going to end up. Now, a staff. It is a long shaft that stores spells. It can in fact store more than one spell, a particular number of spells. And specific staffs will usually have specific spells linked directly to them. When a staff is created, it has 10 charges associated with it. Your typical staff is 4 to 7 feet long, about 2 to 3 inches thick. Normally it's made of wood, though there are bone staffs, sometimes they're metal ones, sometimes they're glass. It's about 5 pounds for a staff if you're looking at its weight. Now, traditionally, a staff might have some kind of crystal or some kind of device at the one end, and either at one or both ends it might have some kind of metal wrappings around it, and it also might have some kind of carvings in it, intricate carvings, runes, things like that carved into it. Staffs themselves oftentimes function as walking staffs, quarterstaffs, or even cudgels, effectively taking the role of these also at the same time as to doing all the spell effects that it has. Now, a staff has an AC of 7, hit points of 10, hardness of 5, and a break DC of 24. Now, a staff, when it is used like a spell completion item. This means it will be effectively a standard action that does not provoke an attack of opportunity. So you don't provoke an attack of opportunity when using your staff. Now, if a spell that is cast with said staff should actually take longer than a standard action to cast, that is how long it will take you. So it depends on a standard action or however long the spell itself actually takes. There's also a 20% chance that the staff you have will have markings on it, when it has those markings, that pertain to the actual abilities and uses of this staff. Things that give you a hint. Only 20% chance of that. Otherwise, its designs are just that, designs. Its runes are just that, runes. Nothing indeed special. If it has those anyway. So a staff has an advantage over things like scrolls and wands. The first advantage is, when you're casting a spell with a staff, you use your ability score. You use any modifiers to the type of spell in altering its DC. That means if you have bonus to evocation spells and you're casting an evocation spell through the staff, the DC goes up. So, it's your ability score, any modifiers, then you figure out the DC of it. That means your spells that you're casting from a staff are just as potent as any spell you might cast. That means very wise, very intelligent, very charismatic spellcasters that have an ability score like that is made to match their abilities, that is very high, will also use very potent spells from, of course, the staff. Now there is yet another detail too. Caster level. When you are using a staff, you are going to either use the caster level of the staff for the caster level of all the spells in it, or your own, whichever is higher. This also means that if you are a very high level caster, a very powerful spellcaster, guess what? Your spells are more potent yet again. Any kind of numerical values based upon your caster level are increased for the spells you're casting. Also, it makes it much harder to dispel your spells. Effectively, you're treating the spells within the staff that you are casting as if you were casting them, using your DCs, your caster levels, your ability to cast them. Now, traditionally, as I said, a staff starts with 10 charges. Every spell that is within this staff will use one or more charges in order for you to cast it. It will list under the specific staffs how many charges each spell will use. Once you use up all these charges on the staff, you can't use it until it becomes recharged. Now, a spellcaster can recharge a staff. What they can do is when they're taking their time to prepare their spells, to meditate and regain their spell slots, when they're doing that and regaining their ability to cast their spells, however version of it, prepared or known, they can sacrifice a spell slot in order to charge the staff. There is a requirement to do this, though. One of the spells on the staff, they have to have the ability to cast it. That means if I can cast a wall of fire and there's a wall of fire in my staff of fire, guess what? I can charge that. But if I don't have any of the spells on this staff, I can't charge it. I have to be able to basically understand what spells are in this staff, only one of them, in order to charge it. Then I can give up one slot of that spell's level and give it one charge. I unfortunately cannot do this more than once a morning, and the staff itself cannot charge more than once a day. So there is a limit in the amount of charging I can do. It's a basically slow process. A staff is basically, I need to suddenly get a lot of bang for my buck right here and there, get a little extra in, and then in my downtime, I basically charge it back up. So there is a limited use of staffs. They don't supercharge very quickly. They are a very slow charging system. But it does give you access to new spells and effectively extra slots when it is charged. So there is that big advantage of it. And they function just like yours. Now, another big advantage of a staff is it can hold spells of any level. Wands are limited. Potions are limited. But staffs, any level spell may be held within here. You do have to be at least 8th level before you would make a staff, meaning that you're going to have access to a certain power level to begin with when creating one. So, that's it for today. I finished talking about scrolls, just a little bit more information about the type of action that you're going to be using and how it compares to everything else. It's like casting a spell. I, of course, did talk about the mishaps that your scroll use could result in some kind of negative effect or some kind of reversed effect if you really screw up. I then began diving into staffs. Wooden sticks that might use a walking stick or a quarter staff of some type that hold a number of different spells and have charges that you effectively treat these charges and spells as if you're casting an actual spell yourself. Your caster level, your DCs, and your basically level of potency when it comes to becoming a spellcaster. So the more powerful you are as a spellcaster, the more powerful your staff use is. And of course I went over all the details about using a staff and what it means to also charge it back up, because you might need to recharge it at some point in time if you use it a lot. And it's a slow process, but a process you might have to do. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about wands, and of course, when we're going to talk about wondrous magic items. Basically, everything else that I haven't talked about. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just for the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link description below. But regardless, Until the next time, I bid you farewell.